Good afternoon, fellow ruminators. Welcome back to another session, Rumination with Andrew. Thank you so much for joining as we are about to discuss a very important topical matter. And this afternoon, we are going to look at the question, would Marcus Garvey be disappointed or would he be proud of modern Jamaica, of Jamaica in 2025? Would Marcus Garvey be proud or would he be disappointed? Has Jamaica disappointed Marcus Mosiah Garvey with regard to development, national development that is, and our economic and social progress over the years? Now, we must understand that Marcus Garvey is the first national hero of Jamaica and one who is internationally recognized and internationally renowned. In fact, we have not really treated Marcus Garvey well in Jamaica. When you go to countries like Brazil, and you go to the universities, particularly the universities that deal with Afro-Brazilian studies, they speak about Marcus Garvey every day. And in almost every paper that their students write, and some of which I read, you will see the likes of Marcus Garvey. And I did not know that Marcus Garvey was so well respected in Brazil until I went there, went to several conferences there, and saw the respect that they had for the man. We, however, in Jamaica, we give lip service to him as being our first national hero. Most of our students, on the other hand, do not know much about him. I don't know if the students who even attend the high school that is named after him, that is the Marcus Garvey Mosiah Garvey High School in St. Anne, I am not sure if they know a lot about him. I'm sure they know that he's the first national hero, but that's where the buck stops. Now, many people have been clamoring, including our student intellectuals, for Marcus Garvey to be a part of the curriculum in Jamaican educational curriculum. But so far, it has never been done because his ideologies, if truth be told, would be a threat to the socioeconomic interests of the Jamaican ruling class. We must remember that Marcus Garvey, and lots of times we forget that even though he was deported from the United States of America on false economic charges and allegations, Marcus Mosiah Garvey, upon deportation, was also a threat to the then colonial system in Jamaica, to the domestic ruling class and also to the colonial masters in England. So they would not allow him to become prime minister of that country, even though he participated in politics upon his deportation and formed the PPP party. Now, we tend to not look at that history and the fact that the Jamaican ruling class, the Jamaican economic and social elites would not like or would not jive, his ideologies would not jive well with these ruling classes. And that is why they have not decided to include him in the curriculum, even though it has been clamored for and Jamaicans would like to learn more about their national hero. But we like to play the cards and we like to play hypocrisy, right? That is what we are. We Jamaicans are hypocrites and we say one thing and we act another way. That is how our people behave. And so we pretend as if we really want to, including when you hear it from the middle class and the upper middle class echelon, that they really want to have Marcus Garvey and Marcus Garvey should be taught in schools. And we heard that from the likes of the Ronnie Thwaites, among lots of other education ministers. And when they went into office, when they went into power, they never were able to accomplish that grandiose feat. But I say this in light because Professor Alvin Wint, in an article that was carried in the Gleaner yesterday, Professor Wint, who seems to be, let me just give you a little analysis. But the title of his article was Garvey Would Have Been Proud. Professor Alvin Wint is suggesting that Garvey would have been proud to have, if he were alive, to see Jamaica in 2025, 63 years after political independence. Now, when I said, who is this guy? Who is this Professor Alvin Wint? And when I went on Our Today online, I understand that he's a distinguished academic professor. Alvin Wint is due to retire next month. Well, this was written last year from the board of Jamaica's largest banking group, NCB Financial Group. That's the NCBFG. So Professor Alvin Wint, I hope that he's the one that I'm speaking about. That he is resigning from the NCB board. Very distinguished professor, I understand. Because when I read the article yesterday about Marcus Garvey would have been proud, I was saying, is this guy JLP? That's what I was asking, because anybody in their right mind would know that Marcus Garvey would have been sorely disappointed with our development. He would have been sorely disappointed had he been able to see the current socioeconomic status of Jamaica. You can always run on your bandwagon and think that Jamaica is developed, but people who know better understand that it is not. 63 years after political independence, we have not developed, and much of the problem, many of our problems are domestically engineered. Many of our social and economic problems are domestically engineered. First of all, Marcus Garvey preached about economic self-sufficiency and self-reliance. We have not yet attained to that fact. In fact, in 1990s, we demolished any trace of self-sufficiency on the Defense Act. That is what Dr. Omar Davis did under the leadership of P.J. Patterson. They completely demolished our agricultural and economic system of self-reliance. And that has never returned, even though they also pay us lip service, that they want us to have agribusiness and all of the nonsense that they're talking about. And by the way, agribusiness does not mean that it is business, it's agriculture that is geared towards self-reliance. Agribusiness is these foreign investors who want you to produce what they want you to produce, the crops that they want to produce to be exported with their money, with their own investments, but is not investing in our domestic farmers to create the agricultural products that Jamaica needs, so we can say that we are building a society that is agriculturally based. Because if we can't feed ourselves, then we are not independent. Because what? We can't survive without food. So if people have to sustain our very existence, or very, the fact that we're living, then the fact is that we're not independent as we think we are. So that's number one, that we are not a self-reliant, a self-sufficient economy. We have not produced one. In fact, we have destroyed it. Let nobody deceive you to believing that Jamaicans want a self-sufficient economy. They had it to some extent, and we destroyed it in the 1990s. And that was deliberately done. And we know that that is in hindsight. Now, people knew back then, people who were sensible knew that it was deliberately done. But those of us who have studied the history and we see what happened in the 1990s and we witnessed part of it, we know that that was deliberately done by the PNP government under the leadership of P.J. Patterson, who is a globalist, by the way. P.J. Patterson is an avid globalist, along with Dr. Omar Davis. Just look at the associations and their affiliations with certain very elite groups. You know that they're a globalist. You know that they're globalists. And globalists don't mean you well. They don't respect national sovereignty. That is what globalists, they just are in a group and they benefit from the policies that they implement. Not that the citizens will benefit, but they themselves will benefit from those policies. So you can call him his black man time now, and because he's black man, but the black man didn't do well for you, right? P.J. Patterson as a black man did not do well for Jamaica's economy and for the majority of the black people who live in Jamaica. So Marcus Garvey would have been very disappointed had he met P.J. Patterson and Dr. Omar Davis, and he would have called them out. He would have called them out because he was a brave man. Marcus Garvey in the United States created his own boat, right? And he said, if there's a white Harvard, you should have a black Harvard. Okay, so let's now segue into education. Would Marcus Garvey have been proud about education? According to Professor Wint, yes, he would have. According to Professor Wint, he would have. He's suggesting that we have high schools in almost all parishes. And for that reason, Marcus Garvey would have been proud. Let us look at some of the assertions of Professor Wint, right? Because he's the person of which we are speaking. And let us use his words and let us, analyze what he's suggesting here. So the title of his article that was carried in the Jamaica Gleaner yesterday, published Monday, June 9th, 2025, Professor Alvin Wint compares nation's development to dreams contained in National Heroes Party Manifesto. Okay, so Professor Alvin Wint piqued the minds of the audience attending the 14th Marcus Garvey lecture at the St. Anne Parish Library on Friday, questioning whether Jamaica's first national hero would have been pleased with the nation's development thus far. Garvey's opinion, Wint suggested, would have been based on the 1929 manifesto of his People's Political Party, PPP, the island's first such party. Now, these are the words of Professor Wint. Marcus Garvey is an amazing hero for us, Wint said. Jamaicans must embrace their identity, build strong businesses, and shape their own destiny, inspiring Black nations to do the same. Have we built our own destiny? Have we really built our own businesses? I don't think so. We are just depending on foreign investors who are proffering Jamaica or Jamaicans very low wages. Marcus Garvey wasn't just about being a visionary. He tried to implement the vision that he had in mind. That is what the thing is. We are just visionaries in theory, not in practice. And I have been saying that on this channel since day one. A lot of what we say, we mean it in theory, but in practice, it's almost like we are unable, we are paralyzed to effectuate the policies that we think, or the vision, I should say, that we have in our heads. Marcus Garvey was a unique leader in that sort of vein. Many people are visionaries because they know what they really want, but they don't have the aptitude and the capacity to put those vision into reality, or those visions into reality. And we know that without vision, the people perish. And the economy of Jamaica, and even the social fabric of our society, the moral fabric of the society, is collapsing. And this man is suggesting that Marcus Garvey would have been proud. I doubt he would have been proud. I think he would have been sorely disappointed, Professor Wint. So these included universal adult suffrage, minimum wage, land reform, the creation of a Jamaican university, the establishment of a government-run electricity network, high schools, and in every parish, a national library system. Okay, so let us look at what he's saying. Adult suffrage, yes, we have the majority of our people, if not all, can vote. So we can tick that off, right? That he perhaps would have been proud of that. Minimum wage, he would not have been proud. He would not have been proud of the low wages, even the wages that are paid to the professional class. He would not have been happy with that, to teachers and to nurses and even to doctors, right? They're not properly remunerated. Land reform, I don't think he would have been proud. Many of our citizens are still landless, and they're still squatting on land that the government says does not belong to them. The creation of a Jamaican university, to some extent, I don't think it's a Jamaican university. I think it's a Caribbean university, right? Should we say that's a Jamaican university? It's the University of the West Indies. And it's operated by these three big Anglo countries, or probably more: Jamaica, Barbados, Guyana, I think, is also involved, among other Caribbean nations. So I don't know if we can say that it is a fully Jamaican education university. I think that we could have built a University of Jamaica. You have a University of Guyana. We could have, if we were visionary, and I'm sure if Marcus Garvey was alive, had he become Prime Minister of Jamaica, that he would have built several universities across the landscape. And if we had a University of Jamaica under Marcus Garvey, you can guarantee that he was going to create different affiliate groups across the island. So you're going to have different extensions across in St. Anne, in Mandeville, in Western Jamaica, so that the citizens would not have to travel all the distance to Kingston to go to University of the West Indies. If you go to the Dominican Republic, that's how their university is. They have a big island, massive island, probably 3 times the size of Jamaica. Okay? And what they have done to their public with their public university is that they have extensions all across the different provinces, what we would call parish. All across, they have at least an extension of the university in the city, because the massive campus is in Santo Domingo. But in other provinces, you have extensions, so you don't have, and the professors, they are sent there. They have their buses and they bus them to the different regions sometimes. So even some of the professors who teach on the Santo Domingo side of the University of Santo Domingo, La UAS, that they call it, they have to be shuttled to other parts of the country, and they have their bus system that does that. We could have done that, or we could have had professors who reside in those areas. They could have been trained. Jamaica could train them overseas or wherever they're trained, or at the University of the West Indies. And they could be professors, lecturers right there in St. Anne. They would not have to travel, right? We could have done that, but we decided not to do that. The establishment of a government-run electricity, who runs that company? I think it's mostly owned by foreign investors. Am I wrong? I don't think that Jamaican government really owns that company. Maybe a very minimal in whatever shares they have in the country. High schools in every parish, but what quality are they? They're churning out illiterate, semi-illiterate students, every year. So I don't think he would have been proud of that. So what described Garvey as brilliant based on the contents of the PP's manifesto, which touched on key elements that are important for small countries to become successful? So he's saying these elements are stability along multiple dimensions, such as political, macroeconomic, and social, infrastructure development, education, and training, and business facilitation. So we're looking at macroeconomic. According to them, our debt is down, and yes, but after the debt, what happens? Are we developing? And nothing is wrong with debt if you are using debt to do the right thing, right? You should be using debt to get yourself out of debt, to become more self-reliant. So if you borrow $1 million to build your agricultural base, then you should have a vision that knowing that you're going to be producing so much agricultural products that eventually you'll be able to pay off the debt and have a surplus because of the investments that you have made. That is what people do when they educate themselves. Oh, I'm going to medical school. I'm going to borrow X amount of money, knowing that when I graduate, my salary will be X. So in that sense, it's not when the person, leaves university out of medical school, it's not that that person, yes, the person is indebted, but the person is going to accrue a certain amount of money that will enable him or her to get out of that debt and to build wealth. And that is what we should be doing with Jamaica, but that's not what we're doing. We are getting out of debt to go right back in debt, and there's no vision in terms of the industries that we are about to develop. We are only depending on foreign investments, and these investors are exploitative, right? They are not there to develop our nation. And Marcus Garvey would have pointed that out if he were alive. He would be saying, what are you guys doing? There are other things that you can think about, but if you do those 4 things well, as a small country, you're likely to be successful, he noted. But we don't have the business facilitation. I think you can even buy a car in Jamaica and get a bank loan much more easily than you would be able to get a bank loan to start a business. That is my understanding. Regarding political stability, Wint looked at how the system deals with close elections using the 2016 general election as example. Well, when we talk about elections, we must understand that a lot of Jamaicans also suffer from voter apathy, so they don't care. They don't care. They don't care who wins the election, and we know that. So yes, perhaps it's one of the reasons why we're having, stability in election, because the people there don't care. They don't care anymore. They realize that the two major political parties are the same. They are a uniparty, and that they are not doing anything to develop the country and the human resources of the country. So, but perhaps if they were more involved, we would not have that stability that we're talking about. Another thing that could be, that could redound toward our political stability is that many of the bright sparks, the intellectuals, leave Jamaica, the ones who understand that the system is not working, and they would have the intellectual strength and dexterity and, the will to launch protests against the system. They leave. So, so the ones who are there are mostly the riffraff. And it's sad to say, but that is true. Who don't understand the system. They are more partisan than they're interested in development, in national development. So, and the ones who have some amount of sense, they just decide to detach themselves from politics. They suffer from voter apathy, and so they just go with the system. They just go along. And so Jamaica's record of a peaceful transfer of electoral power had faced significant tests and passed with flying colors. And we must thank God that there has not been any, upheaval and major riot. But guess what? How long will that last? If we continue to ignore and just to say that, oh, yes, they are slaves, just like, the masters, the slave masters during slavery, because many of the times the slaves, we had a lot of revolts, of course, especially in Jamaica, but sometimes the slaves would not resist, right? And they would sing and they would carry on, and the masters thought that slavery would have just continued. Right? Not because I'm taking kinti kiba heartburn. Not because I'm taking kinti kiba heartburn. It means, therefore, that I am going to always be the same. Eventually, my true colors will be shown. And that is what Jamaicans have to understand. The politicians have to understand that if they've studied the history of humanity, that they will continue for so sometimes as, behaving as if they're peaceful. And out of nowhere, as many of the times the slave masters during slavery experienced, out of nowhere, you have these big revolutionary actions and protests and wipe out the system that you have. Okay? So Andrew Holness, you have got to be careful, and Marky G, because you might have something coming on your hands. In some respect, this came to head in 1990s, at the period 1990 to 1995, inflation in Jamaica, and they're talking about inflation. They've brought down the debt to the Jamaica's debt to GDP and how inflation has been brought down. And yeah, on paper, okay, on paper, and we would not argue with that. Inflation has been brought down on paper. But in terms of when you go to the supermarket, inflation is not down. Inflation continues unabated in Jamaica. The prices of things never go down. The prices of things have never been stable, They have been rising since the 1990s. So when we hear the government suggesting that inflation is down and we see a dollar that might be 159 to 1, and Jamaica's a funny country too. If they say the dollar is 159 to 1 US, when you go to Jamaica to change your dollar, you get a less value for your money, right? You get less value for the money that they're talking about. So you really wonder if the Jamaican economy is real. I sometimes really wonder if our economy is real. I don't think our economy is real. I don't think the Jamaican economy is real. And that is why they can, disperse and they can disseminate such nonsense to you about inflation, and Jamaicans believe them, knowing that when you go to the supermarket, that the cost of living is unaffordable. And the cost of chicken goes up every week, right? The cost of chicken is going to go up every week, and you can't afford it. and you have to buy tin mackerel, and if probably if you can even afford tin mackerel, or eat turkey neck. You eat turkey neck until you turn blue, and then you're going to say the economy is doing very well. I don't understand Jamaicans, right? So in terms of social stability, Professor Wint is suggesting, he noted that the murder rate was down. In the area of infrastructure advancement, he noted the road development that has been taking place in the country. So the crime rate is down. In what way? We're seeing children and women. That is what is up now, the slaughtering of women and children. That is what we're seeing. That's a new murder in Jamaica right now. Children are going missing, and when they're found, they are unalived in the most brutal way. Women are also going missing. Recently in Kingston, there was a lady who was kidnapped, and though she was screaming, there was nobody to come to her rescue. And that was all on cameras. And I'm sure the government, even though the government has cameras around, it seems now, these men have not been identified. Right? So even though we say we have cameras and we're putting cameras all around Jamaica, I'm telling you that the Jamaican government still is not going to be able to, because the camera should be able to recognize the face of the men or the man who actually abducted the lady who was walking on the road in Kingston, and she was just abducted so rapidly by this hoodlum and taken into a vehicle. I have not heard of any justice yet. So what is the purpose of these cameras? What is the purpose? What is the real purpose of having all these cameras, Jamaica Eye or whatever they're called? At the same time, you cannot bring justice swiftly. What is the purpose? So I don't know if Marcus Mosiah Garvey, looking at crime, would have been happy with where we are today. Because I think Marcus Garvey, I should say, would have created an economy that would have been so productive, in which we wouldn't have any time to kill each other, because we would be producing. I think Marcus Garvey, the Marcus Garvey that I have read about, never met, but I met him through his ideas, through his philosophies. I think the Marcus Garvey that I know, based on my vicarious reading of him, I think that he would have built education system to have across the island that would have rivaled any in the world. I think that is what Marcus Mosiah Garvey would do. I think would have at least 5 universities in Jamaica, 5 well-renowned universities in Jamaica. If that is the Marcus Garvey I know, I think he would have had that. I think we would have had bilingual schools or multilingual schools in almost all parishes in Jamaica, because Marcus Mosiah Garvey was also multilingual, right? Wherever he went, he formed papers, and in that particular language, whether in Costa Rica where he was, or I think also in Honduras where he went. Okay, so Marcus Garvey was this larger than life person, and he would want our citizens to be bilingual, multilingual, or be polyglots, because he understood that Jamaicans have to survive in this international market, and he would want us to be as qualified as much as possible. I think the Marcus Garvey that I know through reading, of course I never met the man, he'd have died years before I was born, but the fact is, the Marcus Garvey that I know, he would have also ensured that the entire citizens of Jamaica speak English. He would have demanded that English be spoken, because he was a man who had mastered the English language, a man who also elevated the English language to a high level. Because as he suggested, you can know the colonial language much better than your colonial masters. And if you become more adept at the language, much more than your colonial masters, it means that you are the master. You have taken over his or her position. But we haven't looked at that. that their own tools, you can take it away from them and master it better. It's the same thing as technology, take it away from them. That's what the Chinese have done. And beat them at their own game. That is what the Chinese people have done. And all other cultures, nobody has ever come on this earth and have not built on the legacy left by the previous power center or the powerhouse. If you think about the Babylonians and the Greeks and the Romans and the Medo-Persians, all of these people, they built. So you have Babylon, you have Medo-Persia, and they all built on each other's technological, economic, political achievements. Nobody came into the world being that of a genius that they started from scratch. We've all been building. So nothing would have been wrong, or nothing is still wrong if we use English as a tool to build and to uplift our social status in Jamaica. Nothing would be wrong. So when you hear your pseudo intellectuals at the University of the West Indies, among other universities, saying to you that language, oh, we should be proud. We should be proud of our patois and keep it and whatever. We should be proud of it in the sense that we do not want to disassociate ourselves from our ancestors and the legacies that they have left us. In the same way, if you have a broke-down house in Trelawney or a broke-down house in St. Anne, you should be proud of it, knowing that you have moved away from that poverty and you have moved into a higher sphere of existence. But you should not be embracing, nobody would want to embrace that they have a broke-down house and want to remain in that broke-down house in Trelawney. And these are legacies of slavery and colonialism. The language that we speak, called the Jamaican Creole dialect, is also a language, is also a legacy of slavery and colonialism. Should we just embrace it and not let go of it and know that we have to move on? We need upward social mobility, and that language, just as the broke-down house, if you stay in the broke-down house, you don't educate yourself. You don't move away from that broke-down house, and the community sometimes in which you live is going to cause you to deteriorate, right? So what is this thing that you have to embrace Creole and you don't want to speak English? And because you have to be Jamaican, and because, you know, people love the Creole. People love our poverty too, you know that? Because they can come there and they can take advantage of you. They love your poverty. When they go to Jamaica and they see these poor girls, right? They can take and use them as they will. If those girls were educated, if those girls were economically self-sufficient, they could not. These colonial lords and overlords that go there on their tourism break and take advantage of our people, they couldn't. So when we are saying that we love this Mama Africa thing, and we paint Africa in a negative light too. We paint Africa in a negative light. You know, in the 1990s, I was talking to a university professor in Jamaica, and she said to me back then, and I'm sure it's still the reality, that the African students that she had wrote better English than Jamaicans, for the most part. The ones who speak with the very deep accents, they wrote better English, more sophisticated English, and speak better English than most Jamaicans do, right? Yet they have their African language. Okay, fast forward when I went to Howard University in the earlier, on the dot of 2000, and professors of English said the same thing there, that the African students, and well, they would talk about now the Caribbean students, the ones who are coming from Trinidad in particular, they would praise the Trinidadians for the caliber, the quality of paper that they wrote in English classes. And the few Jamaicans who were there. But what I'm suggesting to you is that what we have created as a impediment to development is this glorification, or I should say over-glorification of the Jamaican dialect, which has not stood us in a great footing on the world scene. We are not viewed as intelligent people. because of the way how we speak. And even members of the other Caribbean regions, you go across the world, and when they talk about Jamaica, they mock you. And this is what I'm saying too. They see us as not being serious people because of the way we speak. This sort of, you know, dance hall language. So the moment you say you're Jamaican, they begin to use the cloths and you get offended. Jamaicans tend to get offended. Yet when you go to Jamaica, that's what you're hearing. And not only going there, when you listen to social media, that is what you are hearing almost every other word that comes out of the mouth. So Marcus Garvey would not have been happy with the international, the global image of Jamaica. He would not have been happy. What we have is a saleable image that seems to be cool. Jamaicans are cool. And if you see foreigners, and as soon as Jamaica comes up in terms of their talking about Jamaica, it's always making fun of us, the way how we speak. And it sounds nice to them. It sounds cool to them because they're enjoying themselves. But they don't want to see you at their universities. They don't want to see you at their business enterprises speaking that way. They don't want to see you. They're just having time with you, having fun with you, having a good time with you in the party, at the party, I should say, right? But don't really fool yourselves about the fact that Marcus Garvey would have been proud. He wouldn't have been proud of our language and our use of language. He would not have been proud of our social backwardness. And a lot of the social backwardness has to do with our language. Our language forms the culture because the culture is the way of life, and the culture comes from the way we think. From the way we think. That is how we form the culture, right? That is why you get the dancehall music and poverty and mother stuff around, because that is how that person is thinking. And while he's generating money from it, but he's also generating a lot of money from it so that he can destroy future generations. And, you know, as I talk about language and the dancehall music, I was hearing the other day, well, I read, not here, I actually read from the Jamaica Observer that Vybz Kartel, who now resides in the United States, was supposed to have had a concert in Trinidad and Tobago. And before he even touched foot on the ground, do you know what the contract paid him? Over 900,000 US dollars. He was supposed to be paid 1.35 million US dollars, right? Of which he has received in his pocket for a concert that was never held, right? Can you imagine? To go on, jump up and sing nonsense, right? And the violence that he often portrays in his music, right? Yet still, the Trinidadians and the people, they tend to like them. And they were willing to give him, the promoter was willing to give him over 900,000 US dollars in an economy where they don't even have enough foreign exchange. That is the sort of Caribbean, but more so Jamaica, that we live in. A people who have been regressing instead of progressing. But they will tell you that we are progressing because according to their stats and their theoretical framework, because that's what it is, right? And when you're writing dissertations, you have to write your theoretical framework, right? It's all theory. It's nothing to do with reality. And oftentimes when the PhD student goes out, he realizes that the real world is not what he wrote in the dissertation. Completely the opposite, right? So that is what we have I don't think Professor Alvin Wint is correct. I think that Professor Alvin Wint is a part of the problem that we have in Jamaica. Intelligent people who are supposed to speak the truth, though the heavens fall, but they haven't got the gumption, they haven't got the moral courage, they haven't got the stamina to say it, that to call a spade and to speak truth to power. Well, he was a part of the power structure. He was a part, based on what I read in Our Today, a part of the National Commercial Bank. And the banking system has also destroyed Jamaica, right? That's for another video. The banking system in Jamaica has helped to have destroyed us and to have, you know, built the money from the middle and lower classes and put it into the hands of these multimillionaires, such as the Michael Lee Chins, right? So that is how the system works. So I don't think, and I have to be honest, I have to be honest with you, I think that the Jamaica of today, were Marcus Garvey to be alive, were he to visit or to have lived there, I don't think he would have lived there. I think he would have opted not to have lived there. He left Jamaica and he went right into the seat of Babylon, right? That's where he died, in England. He could not be with Jamaica. He just could not. Marcus Mosiah Garvey found Jamaica to be repulsive, to be despicable, and he had to leave. I'm sure that it would have given him, ultimately, that would be the heart attack that he would have had. He died of a heart attack, but Jamaica possibly would have given him, before he would have died, had some cardiac arrest in Jamaica, even before, long before he had it in England, because of the decisions that we have been making and the lies that we tell ourselves, the lies that we tell ourselves. Why don't we talk about the fact that, the Norman Manleys and the Buster, and the Buster Manty, all of these people were anti-Marcus Garvey. And Norman Manley, as a lawyer, worked hard to ensure that he was, that Marcus Garvey was apprehended by the legal system, right? We have to learn this history. We have to understand that these people were there to serve the colonial masters, and that I don't know if they would have ever changed Jamaica. I think that Jamaica was supposed to be in the position that it currently finds itself in, because the masses of people who are descendants of slaves need, just like in Haiti, they need to remain on the plantation. They need to remain on the plantation. That is why you have the Carolyn Coopers and all these people at the University of the West Indies who, though they speak well, they want you, Jamaicans, to remain on the plantation by speaking like a backward slave, because the slaves are backward. The slaves were backward. I won't say they weren't intelligent, because they were intelligent according to the exposure that they had, but they weren't sophisticated, right? And when you go to Jamaica, I don't think you see any great difference between what happened on the plantation and what is currently happening at the moment there. I don't think there's much distinction, but please let me know, do you think Marcus Garvey would have been proud, or do you think he would have been sorely disappointed rather, at our development or lack of development? Please let me know. Thank you so much for joining. See you in another video. All the best.